Okay. I'm live again, but I'm not sure how long it's going to take you guys to find the new link. And I still don't know if the volume is working. There's one person. If that one person could tell me if the volume is now working, that would be awesome. It's on the default. Nothing has changed. That's the most. We're good. Okay. Phew. I don't know why it does that. I've not figured that out. Okay. So take 2. Tuesday Night Raw. Let me shut that down. Q&A with Dr. Andi, which is me. Kyle's like, great job. I don't know about that, but we're getting there. We're getting the hang of this. So for those of you that don't know who I am Dr. Andi. I'm a chiropractic physician and a certified animal chiropractor. I've been specializing in dogs for the last 20 years. And half of that time, after I learned more and knew better, I did better, I switched all my animals to a species appropriate diet, which is raw. So tonight, and all this stuff, it's not veterinary advice. It's just what has worked for me and my animals, what I have learned from clients, just experience over the last 20 years. Take it, use it, do your own research, do your own information gathering, and do what's best for you and your animals. So what I wanted to talk about today was pro tips on how y'all put your food together. Right? Because I send people out into the world. I go buy your raw from Raw Dog Food and Company. I'll send you the link. And they're like, which one do I start with? I always, 99% of the time, I start them with Wolf Run Plus. And go do that. Because I've been doing this for 10 years. How many have their routine like down cold? Right? You know what dishes you use, you know how much meat to pull out, and I forget to kind of go over those details with people, right? Like, and sometimes they're home and now they have their raw. Now they're like, what do I do? Do we defrost it? How do we defrost it? How long does that take? And so I had a gal in my office the other day, and she was pretty funny. She was feeding one of the fresh foods, which is not fresh. And months and months of I need to switch. And ordered Wolf Run Plus. I got a text earlier that week on how rank the food is, smell-wise. I actually am like, you got any of those useless masks that we were using for a while there? Use that. And it took 3 days. And she's like, you know what? I'm kind of used to it. I'm like, it's amazing what you get used to smell-wise. And then she's like, I'm kind of doing this all out in the garage. Hi, Ashley. Hi, Keisha. Hi, Jessica. Hi, Kyle. You found me. We had a little microphone glitch that we had to switcheroo around. And she's like, and do I cut it half frozen, half like? She's like, what do you do? And it just dawned on me that and this has happened in previous years. It comes up every once in a while. And how I do it, I use Pyrex bowls. I do everything in the morning for one night, right? So how many people put all their raw breakfast, dinner together at one sitting? Or how many do like a few days out? I tried to do the few days out, and I must have a girl brain because I can never get enough meat defrosted. So pop stuff in the chat. And then when even more newbies come to the channel, they'll be able to read it in the chat and get some ideas. Would love for us to build this community and help these folks out be successful at doing raw. I think this is probably a really important step that I don't talk about enough and kind of gloss over. Like, you'll figure it out. I mean, I did, but I would have loved someone to give me some of these pro tips. So Kyle does 4 days worth. Uh, I know I have a client. She's got 3 boxers and a Labrador now, and Jessica's like, I have girl brain. Kyle does it, yeah. And lately, my girl brain's been even worse. I've been like screwing up defrosting amounts left and right, and I'm like putting notes on the bowls. This one needs 4 more ounces. I'm like, don't know what that's about. But and they do it for 3 days. And so, and what this gal was talking about as we were going through some of these details was, she's like, I was really like dreading having to fit this into my morning routine before I get to work. And then I was like, oh God, I have to pull it out again and mess with it again. Like evening, like we did when we fed kibble, you went to the bucket and picked out your cup of, dried hard nuggets. And you did that twice a day, right? Most of us anyway, back in the day, way back in the day. And she's like, oh, I had to pull everything out again. I'm like, oh yeah, no, I don't pull everything out again. I only pull everything out 1 time a day. And I actually use that time. And I got to say, I go pretty slow. I'm not in any rush. I'm drinking my coffee. I'm listening to a podcast, and it takes me about 45 minutes to get everybody fed and dinner taken care of and everything cleaned up and everything back in the fridge. Now, I could probably do it faster. I could, do math and do more days in a row, but I like that morning time. Usually just me and the dogs, and I'm doing my thing, and that's what we do. That's what I do to wake up. I know, playing with tripe, to wake up. Crazy people. Yeah, so Kyle's feeding 2 dogs. I currently have 6. So my mother's dog got transitioned over because he was no longer allowed to eat his canned Purina, his Hill Science Diet prescription, topped with Thailand powder. And I'm all about people having choice and choosing stuff. But the problem came in is when my littles would lick out the bowl, get a few bites of it. I swear Molly Brown got like a whole bowl one time. And I'm like, I work too hard and I spend too much money to have you destroy their microbiomes in one feeding with the Thailand powder. So I make his food the same way I added him in. So this is great, Kyle. Thank you. He cut, if I could talk, he cuts partially frozen tubes into equal sections like tripe, pork, salmon, and egg. Pork, salmon, and egg. There's one kind that has all that in it at Broad Dog Food Company. Duck and rabbit, store those in the freezer, and then incorporate slices into the mix each week. So that's cool, right? Do you use a scale or do you eyeball it, Kyle? I use the utility sink. I have a little laundry room off the kitchen, and I actually use the top of the washer and dryer to prep the dog food, and then that gets wiped down after we're done. And I use the utility sink next to it to defrost the full chubs. And lately I've been feeding super heavy tripe. So I've been buying 5-pound chubs of tripe, and we actually go through it probably in about 3 days, 3.5 days. And so we're going through a crop ton of tripe. I add tripe to the blends that already have tripe. Like, we're really heavy on the tripe right now, especially if I'm also going to be putting in duck feet, duck heads, duck necks, chicken feet, because I up the bone and I up the tripe. So I even put in more tripe when I'm feeding those things. I actually need to place an order. I don't have any of that right now. Got to get the kids some more duck heads. And all 4 of those things I listed off only go to my bigs. I bet Torchy, even with a mini dachshund, his mouth is probably big enough to eat a duck neck or a chicken neck. his digestive system can't handle it. So, and he likes the gulp. So he's not getting those. Maybe we'll try again. And that's what I love pet owners to, people in general, honestly, is it's not, oh, this didn't work this one time, and then it's like, it'll never work again. Try it again in a little bit. Please. That flavor didn't work this time. Okay. Mix small bites into a flavor that does work. Try it later. It's not like written in stone. My Doberman was allergic to beef. And this is the story I told myself. And he seemed to really turn bright red and get really eye goopy when we had beef when he was a puppy. So I took him off of beef. And oh my God, 6.5 years played, he didn't have beef. So we had even more meat defrosted, and he couldn't have beef beef tripe. So I would get him lamb tripe, and I mean, blah, blah, blah. And then one day, I looked at him and I go, we're done with this. And that was my energy. We're done with it. And so now he eats beef, and it's been fine. Still use a scale. I'm never stopping using a scale. I know Neely doesn't use a scale, and that just blows my mind. And her comment is, well, my dogs aren't fat. I go, my dogs aren't fat either. I don't even think they'll get fat. I don't even think I can feed them enough to get them fat, truthfully. But I don't want to waste any money. I don't want to overfeed. Like, at how much money per ounce? I want to know exactly what ounces are going in my dog. So I think I've said that before. I don't think you can get that good. I'm sorry. No, I think the bottom line kind of dictates that, but play with it. Chicken heads. I don't know. Can you find them? I've never seen chicken heads. I wonder if they don't do chicken heads because I don't know if they can eat that beak. Like, the duck beak seems different than a chicken beak, but I don't know. Maybe I don't know. They're all still just cartilage, right? I would imagine. I don't know. I've never thought much about beaks, but yeah, I don't. If you can find them, I've just never seen them. I don't see why. And we want to feed heads because it got the brains in it. It's got the eyeballs in it. It's got the tongue in it. They're really gross. They're awesome. My dogs love them. And yes, painter's tape. Let's talk about painter's tape. I should take a picture of this, but when you are in my laundry room and up above where I work, on the door, like the cabinet door, is painter's tape that say chicken, duck heads, venison. And I reuse them. I pull them off because they don't take the burnt finish off, and I put them on top of the Tupperware. Mostly because when my husband did more feeding, he needed to know what was in the containers. Now he's not doing as much feeding, so I do it for my brain that's not working so great. But generally, I remember what's in there. But yeah, you should see this door. It is covered with hunks of painter's tape because it sticks to the Tupperware and it comes off the doors, and I don't have to write on things as much. I don't have to use up as much, and it's just super easy. So yeah, painter's tape. Excellent pro tip if you need to. Well, and I have 2 bigs and then I have 4 littles, right? And so I use the same containers. So I need letters on the containers. Like, this is Gizmos, this is Oliver's, this is Torches, this is, and I got to keep the bigs apart. You can probably tell them weight wise. Of course, Riggs has more, but painter's tape, awesome pro tip. Pyrex or glass. I generally only store food in this house, mine or the animals, in glass. There's very little plastic going on. You will see a stack of plastic. They eat out of glass. End of discussion. My animals eat out of glass. They don't eat out of metal. They drink out of porcelain. That's what we do. I only eat out of glass. It's just healthier. But I do have these round black containers that are a number 5. And so you have to turn over your containers. And a number 5 is the most stable plastic, as long as you don't. It's actually the most stable plastic even if you heat it. But there's no leaching from it if it's not heated. So since they're going into the freezer and going into the fridge, it's a perfectly stable plastic. And so that works really well. That's why those little Keurig cup things, turn them over. So if you heat up your coffee in a plastic Keurig container, and I think they're usually number 2, they're leaching so much toxic chemicals out of that plastic into your coffee. I believe it's Costco's organic cups that are actually a 5, believe it or not. And 5 is generally what's used to make your coffee makers. It's that harder solid plastic. Random aside on plastic, but. And Kyle asked if all mine eat the same proteins at the same time. Currently, mostly yes. When Riggs was not eating beef, that was different. Now I buy Wolf Run Plus. I buy Beginner's Choice. I buy the Star Bully. Is that the right one? But the big beef rolls, and everybody will eat them. The Beginner's Choice and the other one. When I also wear a glove. That was the other thing. She's like, how do you get that? My client the other day, how do you get that tripe smell off your hands? I'm like, glove. I only use one, right? So because 2, and I don't know, but I use one glove. And then when I'm done with the meat, I wash it and I reuse it. So I reuse this glove till it gets a hole or, so many times. So I'm like, go get some gloves. Need gloves. Glass, painter's tape, gloves. But I have some, like my really little one she really doesn't like organs unless it's a really little piece because that's too slimy. The Doberman does much better on fish than the others do. So there's like these little nuances to what everybody eats. Yes, the dogs lick my fingers after mixing. Absolutely. They actually, after breakfast, they come in and want to lick gloves and maybe get a couple extra bites. And yeah, they'll lick my gloves. Yeah. So for the most part, yeah, they all eat the same proteins at the same time. Some just get less of other flavor. It's more like they don't really like that flavor. And so we kind of alter it a little bit. The Doberman and the Poodle generally always eat the same thing. And then the littles are a little different kind of thing. But we do a lot of beef, a lot of pork, turkey, fish. I have to get the salmon and the pork, salmon, and egg one because they won't touch the fish, the actual like whole fish. Nobody will. Nobody in this house. And I've given them frozen. I've given them defrosted. I've cut them up. Somebody said, well, why don't you puree them? I'm like, I love my dogs, but not that much. That's just gross. And I don't even know what container I want to do that in. So stainless? No, why no stainless? I don't. That's just an intuition. I think maybe it has more to do with I don't like metal around. I don't, right? Like, so I don't think there's technically anything wrong with stainless. I don't want it by my mouth. So it's just kind of something I do. I just like the glass. I'm like water that sits in stainless. I don't like drinking my water out of a metal bottle. It's more that. It's more my human projection than anything else. So, let's see. What else did we talk about? We talked about her getting some gloves, talked about getting some Pyrex or some really hard plastic containers. Like I said, I still don't want them eat out of it. And then, okay, so what do we do with the Pyrex, right? So I fill all the bowls up. I throw all the bowls down. They all have their spots that they eat. I pick up the bowls. I refill those same bowls for dinner because I'm going to cut down on water, washing dishes or sticking them in the dishwasher. My husband is neurotic about hand washing all of our dishes. There's a little behind the scenes. He's out of town this week, and I will inform him when he returns that the dishwasher still works because we don't use it if he's around. It's his OCD, his thing. Yes, it uses a lot of water. Yes, I know all the arguments. It really just doesn't matter for him. But he also uses Dawn dish soap. So I also want to cut down on the amount of Dawn dish soap that the dogs are eating. And so these bowls don't get washed every day. So I put the lid and then I pull them back out for dinner. They all eat. I just did this. I put them all back out and I covered them all up empty and put them back in the fridge. And I will use them in the morning. So I do that about 3 days. I reuse the bowls. Just because why not? And we don't need to wash them, and I don't care if they're perfectly clean, but I don't leave them out either to grow bacteria. They go into the fridge. What else have I missed? What else has worked well as you went through your journey of figuring out raw feeding? Anything? It's like I said, I do it so much. Let's see, what else did we talk about at the appointment? Oh, yes. Cutting open the tubes. Knife. Well, partially frozen, like Kyle does it, is going to save you the splatter all over the room or the splatter in your face. Yeah, cutting the bag that comes in. And I have had full-on tripe splatter. Stuff's gone into the coffee, not drinking the coffee. Like, yeah, I've had it happen. So what I do is partially frozen is going to help with that. I generally don't have it partially frozen. It's generally almost completely defrosted at that point. Is a sharp knife. I grab a paper towel and put it over the knife, and then we cut. And let all the juice kind of get soaked up into the paper towel. It helps most of the time. Ashley says some rude helper may have told your client to suck it up and do what's best for your dog. Yeah. Well, and she pretty much got that from me in text earlier. She was all right with that. She was making a big deal about the smell. I'm like, you'll get used to it. You'll get used to it. So Jamila, yeah, you can, if it's completely defrosted, that's how I do it with the paper towel over it. Kind of keeps the splatter down. If you can get your timing down and it works to do it when it's partially frozen and then let it finish thawing, or putting a portion back and pulling, however you need to do that. That helps with the splatter too. The partially frozen, I mean, oh, my hands are so cold these days with the winter, and it's the fridge that we use is out in the garage. We're lucky enough that we have an animal fridge, or it's actually an animal shelf in the extra fridge in the garage, which is right off the laundry room. So it works out really well, and that's where all the animal stuff goes. If you don't have that, you might want to have a spot in the fridge that you can make sure you clean up and clean well. I mean, I use Thieves Cleaner, which is made by Young Living. It has essential oils in it and no toxic chemicals. I have never used bleach to clean up after it, and we have never had an issue raw feeding ever in the 10 years I've been doing it. So what do you clean up after? And now, granted, I spray it and then I use a paper towel. I'm not reusing a cloth. I'm not reusing a sponge. And it's the washer dryer. It's not the counter in the kitchen. So I do separate it a little bit, but I'm not that careful about everything. Honestly, I'm more careful with poultries, like you should be in your kitchen, and less careful about the beefs, right? But other than that, that's how I clean up. Does anybody have any pro tips or certain cleaners they do like? Kyle says leaving on a counter for a few hours helps in a pinch, or a cold sack in the helps. I leave it in the utility sink. I let it defrost overnight. I'm not very particular about, defrosting in the fridge for 3 days. Oh, help me God, that would just fry my brain. I do that with like my Thanksgiving turkey. I do it properly, but with the animal food, I just let it defrost. And right now, because it's winter, it's not generally all defrosted in the morning, but in the summer it will be. But so I pull it out at breakfast to prep for the next day. And so it sits out for 24 hours. And so far we're so good. We're all good. I I see your question, Jessica. I'll come back to that. Hang on one sec. Ashley says, ooh, talk about how long is too long or not to defrost the meat. How long is too long? So I do 24 hours and it goes in the fridge. Things have been forgotten. Things have been left out. We are talking about dogs, and we are talking about a dog's biome that has been genetically designed to handle mildly off food. And I think even Dee Dee and I were talking about how her clients will call her up and go, my dog won't eat this food. It must be a bad batch, right? She was talking about bad batch. It must be off. And she's like, really? Because the chicken wings in your trash that have been there for 2 days, aren't they a little off? But they decided to eat those. And, they eat the other dog's poop. And, 3-day-old goose poop is like the best. So, it's not a real great argument that whole batch of raw food is off because the animal won't eat it. So they're designed to be scavengers. They're designed to, eat what they can find. So I have been known, okay, this is going out across the world. I have been known to know that the tripe is a little off because it smells even worse. And I'll finish, and you can even kind of tell that the juice is just a little thicker than it should be. Like it's just starting to, and I've been known to feed it. And that's coming out of the fridge. Like we just didn't go through a batch fast enough. And with your raw dog food, you can refreeze it. Like if I pick out a flavor and it's just not jiving or whatever, or I know I'm going out of town for 4 days, I will put that in the Pyrex back in the freezer. So it doesn't get slimy by the time I get back. It just goes back into the freezer and I'll pull it back out when I get back. So you can always refreeze stuff too. If it's just, even if it's like, oh, that's like day 3, we're going to go out tonight. We're not, or whatever. Put it back in the freezer. Don't throw it out. Don't throw it out. And know your animals. Like I have, Torch is he's kind of a medical thing, but my 4 dogs have stomachs of bloody magnitude. Like I know that little bit of iffy food's not going to bother them. If you're dealing with an issue with your animal and they are already sensitive and you're already struggling with maybe getting them to eat, don't feed that stuff. But how long is too long? I don't know. When does meat actually all go bad? But I literally pull out stuff rock hard frozen one morning and then it sits out until the next morning. And then I cut it open, dish it out, put it in containers, and it goes in the fridge. That is my routine. It is a good question. I have heard of someone who forgot about a whole case of meat and it stayed outside overnight in the summer and she put it in the freezer and refed it. So, and the dogs are fine. But even if I'm like, don't throw out raw dog food. I have a lot of clients. Oh, they don't finish their breakfast. Put it back in the fridge. They didn't finish it for dinner. Okay. Or put it back in the freeze it. Pick out a different flavor. Go back to it. And don't throw out raw dog food. It's like, I think Jamaila's talking to Kyle, the weight Gibbs and the girls get. I'm not sure if I'm missing part of that question or if you're talking to somebody else. But Jessica, she has a side question. Are my dogs all adopted or from a breeder? If adopted, did you ever have a problem adopting dogs since you are raw feeding them and don't really get them vaccinated? Let's see here. It's a menagerie. And if you actually saw them all, they don't match at all. It's a menagerie. So Gizmo is my 3-legged Jack Russell mix. He came from the Aurora Animal Shelter 15 years ago. the spring. At that point, and still am she was running the Aurora Animal Shelter. We are still good friends. So she didn't ask me any questions. We were feeding kibble still at that point. So that didn't come up. And the shelter got a hold of him, and he got everything under the sun at that point. And actually, I lied. So he's a tripod because he was dropped off by a family and his front left leg was fractured and they couldn't get it to set. So they just amputated his arm and neutered him. And then whatever vaccines he did there. And this is before I knew better and did better. I actually brought him back 6 months after we adopted him to get his rabies. And that's the last vaccination he got. And so no problems there. And I got his rabies and they were happy, so I had no problems there. And I don't think anyone even ever asked why they wouldn't necessarily see him again. Right. Okay. And then Miss Molly Brown came 10 years ago in the summer, this coming up summer. So 9.5 years. And she was thrown out in the trash, on a very hot summer day. And a little girl was walking by and she heard this little noise in the box, and she opened the box and there's a puppy in the box, and she ended up at the vet's office that I was working at. Actually, at the time, that clinic was still owned by Dr. Judy Jasek. So she was dropped off at the holistic vet, and she was there, and literally that was Friday. I remember this distinctly. That was Friday. And Saturday morning, I was there first thing, and they're like, "Hey, Dr. Andi, look in there, see if it's alive." So he didn't do anything because he didn't know it was wrong. They gave her fluids and put her in a kennel. And I look in there and there's big eyes and her little tail. I'm like, "We're good. We're alive." I'm like, "Why am I looking in here? I don't want to find out." And so she was cooked in a box pretty dynamically. And she was 8 weeks old. She was super itty bitty tiny. And so she was at Dr. Jasek's. She didn't do anything with him. And Molly kind of went from tech to tech to tech. And then it was 4th of July weekend. And they're like, "Dr. Andi, it's your turn." And she never went back. And then I got her spayed after her first heat. And it was at that moment that I'm like, we never vaccinated this dog. Like, it just didn't dawn on me. And because it was Dr. Jasek's clinic, they spayed her. I did run her tighter. She had nothing. And they're like, "What do you want to do about this?" And I'm like, nothing. So I don't know. My suspicion is she ended up in that box because she had a vaccine reaction and they thought it was dead. And she may have had something when she was super, super young. And, people are stupid. That's my suspicion on how that happened. But that would have been the only thing she had. So there's that. And now, nope. So Crosby, this is a lot. Maybe I should have said no. We shouldn't answer this question because it's a long answer. The Doberman, I did everything wrong. Went to Craigslist, CKC, shit-ass breeder, like junk. And I knew all this, and we still did it. I feel it's more of a rescue. And I had to beg, plead, and borrow with this woman to own. She would not. This was the text. "I love my fur babies so much that I have to vaccinate them." I'm like, and I'm sending her articles. I'm like, "Here, educate yourself, woman. So I did get him out of there. She had only given him parvo once. And I did not ask her, and she did not offer that she did deworm him once, which actually didn't work anyway. So the feeding never came up. I mean, like, this is backyard junk breeding going on. And we paid for it dynamically with this dog. And, it's what we took on. It's what we chose. I did it all well educated. I admit it. And I did it anyway. And we will not ever do that again. But he was meant to be here for whatever reason that is. And so after he came, I ran his titers on parvo and distemper. And I think I did do a distemper at 16 weeks on him. Crosby was an interesting story. Crosby was a $2,500 show dog who showed up at a client of mine's house with no femoral head in his right hip. There's just a stick. I've explained this, right? There's no femoral head. And so she wanted him to show, breed, track, agility. Like, he just couldn't do all that stuff. He's perfectly fine as a house dog. He's the most active thing around here. He moves great, all that jazz. So he came to me. He was free. And so there was no question on what I was feeding or anything with him. And he came with distemper. I ran titers, and he got a parvo at 16 weeks. I think it's kind of blurry, but then that's been it. And then Torch came from a raw feeding breeder. So we didn't have any problems there. But yeah, you definitely, I don't know how much adopting, like from rescues and shelters and that, you'll get for the raw feeding. But if your other dogs are not up to date on vaccines and stuff, you could really run into some pushback on that, unfortunately. Let's see. Does that cover everything? That's my whole menagerie. And then my mother's cockapoo has been conventionally medicined up the wazoo. Every damn vaccine, everything you can think of. Okay. So, and any details you want me to suss out, let me know. But that's kind of the lowdown on this crew. How much is the weight of the food you give a 68-pound dog? Okay. So 68 times 2.5% is that I can't tell my calculator. 68 times 2.5%. So 17 ounces a day. So what is that? Divided by 2. So 8.5 per meal. Is that Gibbs? Is that the one you're already doing 8.1 for? Let me know. So I go, depending on what we're dealing with. If we're dealing with a puppy, it's 3% or more-ish. If we're dealing with a senior that's not active, it's 2%-ish. Everything else in between, I start personally at 2.5%. So 17 ounces a day, and divide it by 2. Or if you're doing OMAD, 17 ounces a day. So you're right on the button with 8.1. And that's the glorious thing about raw feeding is maybe that's not enough for your dog. Maybe it's too much for your dog. But it gives you a place to start. So you, I think, have started in a right spot. Are you seeing anything? Like, is he super, super hungry? Because how long have they also been raw now? So, when you go from kibble, more processed diet, a lot more fiber, a lot more fillers in it, and they go to raw, they're like, oh my God, I'm dying. I'm so hungry. I'm so hungry. I'm so hungry. I'm so hungry. And you've kind of got to wait that period out. And it's going to be different for every dog. You got to wait that period out and then see, are they still, a month in, 6 weeks in, and you're seeing a little more rib than maybe you'd like. But Americans are not very good at how fat their dogs are. So maybe ask a friend or 2 or 3 if your dog is fat before you decide if they are or not. Most people are like, oh, they're too skinny. I'm like, no, they look fine, and keep them there. I think they look great. We're just so used to so much overfeeding of ourselves and our animals, and we're so used to seeing fat people and animals that it's hard when you actually have something that is the correct weight in general. So, but if they're still just dying and maybe go up an ounce, see if that settles it. Maybe like Jamele say, they also get a lot of treats. Okay, so maybe you only do 8 ounces. Maybe he doesn't need that 0.1, or maybe you can go down to 7.8 and a lot of treats. I try to find, it's my personal, I find the lowest amount that makes them happy, with along with all the treats and everything else that I do. And I don't do a lot of treats, but sometimes I do actually, but it just kind of depends. They've never had a kennel. Okay, I wasn't sure whether you landed on that or how you did that, Jamele. I wasn't sure. So sounds like you've got that dialed in. Treats are for training. Well, it doesn't matter. Mine just know I have a pocket full of treats after the end of my workday, right? Oh, and Torch has started this new thing because we have an ear that we are struggling with. Let's just put it that way. We don't want to project too much onto it. And it's the ear that we've struggled with in the past. And so I would always put him on the bathroom counter because he's got these legs. So I put him up there and I look in his ears and he's like, oh, I look at my ears. And then he would get treats, right? Well, now, even when the ear is fine, we're like in the middle of our struggles, like in between times, he comes by and he's like, you need to look at my ears, right? You do. You need to look at my ears. I think you need. And even if I look in there and I'm like, oh, that's good. And over here, and he gets a treat. So yes, he's playing me. Yes, it's okay, right? So he gets a treat and then everybody gets a treat. It's kind of like our bedtime treat thing. But it's super cute because now he's doing it in the morning too. You need to look at my ears, right? And of course he's super cute. And I fall for it and actually, that's right. It only started since I got the Papasuka treats, which are these high-end dried beef treats. That's when he started showing up and offering, could you look at my ears? Because I really want one of those treats. So unless you're thinking he's too skinny or seeing anything else, I think you got that dialed in really good for him, Jamele. For Gibbs. Jessica says, I already got denied from a rescue when I tried to adopt, and I got denial after they called the vet because my dogs aren't up to date on vaccinations since one of my dogs almost died from them. Yeah. It's hard. I'm sorry. There's policy and ignorance out there, right? This is their policy. It doesn't matter that one dog or any of your dogs, it will never, you're not going to choose that again because you had that experience, right? And there's a lot of ignorance on how even diseases spread and, ignorance on what a titer test is and how it can be performed. And yeah, it's hard. It's going to be hard. Yeah. And if they're actually going to follow up with your vet, you can't even lie. So if possible, I would stick with maybe your shelters because I don't think they do as intense of a follow-up as the rescues. And somewhere along the line, and they do good work, rescues they think they're a bag of chips, all of that and a bag of chips, right? And they do good work, and I would never get involved in rescue. But they've gotten quite high and mighty on who they'll adopt to, and I don't know. I find them interesting. I find the whole thing very interesting. The whole atmosphere, the whole environment of rescues and the mentality of people that are involved in rescue. It's fascinating to me. I work with some, I adjust dogs for different reasons on different times with them, but getting involved in them on another level it doesn't seem fun to me. So you said, so a 13-year-old can get a buy. What do you mean? What do you mean? All right. Any other pro tips, folks? What else? What else did I forget? You got to clean the counters up. I use paper towels. Never use bleach. Some people use those Clorox wipes. They're not allowed in my house. Toxic. Let's see. What else? You can defrost the meat outside of the fridge. When I do get a buy from the rabies. State law, and I'm in Colorado, dictates no. Okay. With that said, and I don't know what other states, what they have in place. I'm going to assume they're all very similar. With that said, your veterinarian has discretion to be able to write you an exemption saying this dog, whatever they think is valid. Most of the time, a seizure, if they have seizures, most vets would be like, okay, fine, you're exempt, and write you an exemption. I would like to think that the vast majority of vets, if a 13-year-old dog comes in and you go, I don't want to do any more rabies, they would go, okay. They may not write you an exemption, it really doesn't get you out of much. I don't even know if it would technically get you out of licensing your animals if you live in a county or city that you need to license them. I don't know if an exemption gets you out of that. I don't know. You'd have to make some phone calls and all that. But the exemption, you may be able to go to doggy daycare still, right? Like this exemption, we don't have rabies, but the doggy daycare may not want that animal there because it's not vaccinated. Which, is that old argument with kids in school, right? If that's the one dog that's not vaccinated, but the other 30 are, or that's the one kid and the other 30 are, what's the problem? Old circular argument that makes my head hurt. When I was practicing out of Dr. Jacek's office, her kind of rule of thumb, and she's a very holistic vet, very holistic here in the state of Colorado. And she's on Dee Dee's podcast. You're probably all familiar with her. You probably maybe even seen her if you're here in the Denver area. She's like anything after 8, she wouldn't recommend. And there's research showing that the one vaccine they got of rabies at a year covers them for life, right? So it really depends on building that relationship with your veterinarian. Know your veterinarian. And see where they land. And I would love to think that most vets at age 13, if you said as the owner, I don't want to do this anymore, they'd be like, yeah, that's probably fine, right? Now, if the owner is uneducated and goes in there and they're due for their rabies, most likely most vets would then give them rabies at 13. You see how that, because they make a lot of money. And it is technically state law, although most of us are not given informed consent before our animals are vaccinated. So it's kind of null and void if you do not get informed consent. And then there's always just don't get caught. Yes, we can talk about Meadow. Yeah, I think you should try that, Jessica, because I do think he would sign off on that one dog. I really think most of them would really realize we have an autoimmune disease, we have a seizure stuff going on, we have brain stuff going on. Dr. Jacek would say she'd even write them for dogs that are chronically awfully itchy because they're inflamed, right? We have an inflammatory process. I think maybe if you bring a good enough argument to why you would like this exemption, I think it makes them nervous based on their veterinary license, so they want a really good reason. I don't think they have to be nervous about it, but they are. That's just kind of looking in, and I have a license and I know what affects it and what really doesn't, and so it's kind of just my point of view on that. But yeah, autoimmune is fine. It personally, if a vet vaccinated him again, that would be malpractice when you have that much. So yeah, I would go in, get that exemption, get it written in his chart. Nothing goes in this dog. That's what I tell my techs and my vets when I drop my dogs off at the vet's office. You can take whatever you want out of my dog. Blood, urine, poop. Nothing goes in. Nothing goes in. It's my rule. Nothing goes in. They think I'm funny. I'm not kidding. So yeah, I would fight for that one, Jessica. Yeah. Can I talk more about teeth adjustment with Meadow? That was really interesting. I want to hear if the problem was found. Well, she's not coming in for a couple more weeks for her follow-up. And honestly, I don't remember the other visit. But I will talk about teeth adjusting. And sometimes I adjust where teeth used to be. Everything's energy. But when you come in to see me, I do a palpation and a lot of applied kinesiology, or AK. So it's a lot of muscle testing and a lot of asking the body what needs to be adjusted. So we always start with if they're switched or not. It's just an energetic switching. And we check that, because if they're switched, the rest of my analysis is going to be off. Easy way to explain that. And so we do that. And then I check for neurological teeth. I check up, lower. I mean, I can muscle test out and find out exactly which tooth. I generally don't. I generally just find upper or lower, left or right, and I do that. And what I mean by doing that is all on the outside of the dog's mouth, and it's actually just a little pumping action on each tooth. And that's the adjustment. And because I'm not finding the individual teeth, mostly because they don't have the patience for it and I don't have the patience for it, when I get to the spot and I do just a few, they will be like, oh, so much better. So what exactly is a neurological tooth? It just happens to be what's bothering them. It just happens to have, neurological information that's aberrant, which is just wrong or off, and it's bothering them. Is it bothering them from a dental? Is it bothering them from crashing into the glass door because it wasn't open in time to go out? Is it bothering them because they chew on a bone on the side of the mouth all the time? Is it bothering them because their tooth, when it came in at 5 months, wasn't quite whatever, right? So I don't know the why. I just know I can find it. And sometimes, and after dentals, I tend to really find it. And a lot of times it's just an adjustment over where the tooth even used to be. And we just do it because the body's asking for it. So I'll be up a little higher on the gum. Okay. And that's one of the first things I clear out. And generally when we clear it out, I don't find it again on that same dog for a while, or if something happens. Cool. And then I actually check all the muscles of mastication, because it's all surrounding this TMJ joint, which holds a lot of proprioception. And proprioception is how the body uses the neurological system, the nervous system, to tell you where you are in space. That's how you can stand upright, and you're upright. And it's how the dog stands up and knows it's upright, right? And when to pick up a paw to go over a cord. That's part of your proprioception system has to kick in and help you over that cord, or how to make that jump. There's a lot of other nerves and neurological information playing, but proprioception, and we have a lot in our TMJ, a lot. So do dogs. We actually have a lot in our ankles, right? In our cervical spine. So when a dog goes in for a dental, what do? Open the mouth. I don't know the steps, right? They have to intubate them. So you must knock them out a little bit beforehand and then intubate them. So they're opening the mouth, shoving a tube down the throat, got to breathe. They have a catheter on the arm. And then this Meadow is not very big. She's about 15-pound dog. But you talk about like dogs like Molly size at 6 pounds, or I have some clients that are 4 pounds. They actually have to go to a specialist just because they need the equipment small enough to fit in their mouth. And some, if the vet happens to use equipment that's a little too big for the little dog's mouth, that might impact it. And then how many extractions, right? And how difficult were they? Some old dogs' teeth just fall out. Some need to be dug out. And so if they're digging and they're moving the head and they're doing all this, but they're doing all of this under anesthesia. So there's no muscles that are going to contract and help protect these joints. So I think sometimes the impact can be even greater when they're under anesthesia. And this is not anything that they're doing wrong at all. There's no malice. It's just how it is, and then every dog is going to react to it differently. I also think sometimes big dogs after dentals or surgeries, when you have two little techs trying to get them into a kennel, body parts fall and dogs kind of get bumped. And I think that sometimes I'm fixing stuff that's like, this wasn't part of the surgery. But I do think some stuff like that happens. Like, how do you get a Great Dane puppy into a kennel when you got 200-pound techs doing it? So, but we do have to consider that they're under anesthesia. So their muscles are not protecting these joints with all this movement. And then we have all of this neurological information and a lot of it that can be disrupted and needs to be turned back on or rewired or connected up or whatever terms you want to put to it. Upper cervicals when they're moving the head around. It's huge for proprioception, pain with that. Cranial bones. I generally check cranial bones off the bat after we make sure the TMJ. And then the hyoid. Dogs and us have a hyoid. It controls all the tongue movement. There's a lot of neurological information there. So we definitely check all that too. So in Meadow's case, we're going to go through all of that. We're going to check everything down the spine into the back end. It's all connected. I don't just adjust one portion of it. And then it could be she don't like her food too. I don't know what she's eating. And that's why that was part of what was in the email. I was like, maybe she doesn't like what she's eating. Sometimes with little dogs, they have their kibbles are too big. Maybe she just needs this, I don't know. I don't know what she's eating. So all of that. So that's fun. I was just super proud of Mom asking a question instead of going directly down the vet route of it. All right, my friends, that went fast. We're just about done. Anything else? Any last minutes? I hope this, we'll title it appropriately, but I hope this helps all the newbies that have the frozen food and still on overwhelm, right? They have the raw, it's frozen, and they're still on overwhelm. And hopefully this will help give them some ideas on how to put their routine together, because everybody's routine is different. All right, my dear friends, I will be here next week. I won't be here this just dawned on me like an hour ago. The last Tuesday of this month, I will be out of town. So I hope that contributed to your worlds. I'm so grateful for y'all. And maybe before your eyes close, you go over what you're grateful for in this world. My animals are always the top of my list. And until next week, how much fun can you have with your animals? Bye.